Hello guys, welcome to my channel where stories filled with revenge, moral lessons and love are told. Before I dive into this story, I want to encourage you to like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next powerful story. I never thought I would spend my nights surrounded by files, photographs, and safety manuals instead of sleep, but that became my reality when Grant Sloan arrived at Blue Core Systems as the new Vice President of Operations. My name is Marissa Lane, and I was a compliance analyst for the company, a role that people often joked was the Department of No. But to me, compliance wasn't about shutting things down. It was about keeping people alive, about ensuring that the men and women on our floor could breathe clean air, walk without fear of collapse, and go home whole to their families. When I first heard Grant's name mentioned, it came with whispers of velocity and productivity. He had a reputation in the industry for tearing down bureaucracies, streamlining systems, and getting results. On his first day, he called me into his office, a space he had already transformed into something that looked more like a command center than a workplace. His smile was broad, rehearsed, almost too polished. "Marissa," he said, tapping my risk register file that I had left on his desk. "This is, how do I say it, artist-style paranoia." I blinked at the word, thinking he must have meant artistic. But no, he leaned forward, confident, smug. "You're creating problems that don't exist. Velocity is what matters. We need production up by 15% this quarter, not endless notes about the thickness of filters or the angle of emergency lighting." I tried to keep my voice calm. Those notes are based on actual inspections. If filters aren't replaced, particulate levels rise. And if emergency lights aren't aligned, visibility. "Fair trash!" He cut me off with a laugh. "That's what this is. Fair trash." The word struck me like a slap. Fair trash. That was how he saw the work I did, the work meant to safeguard lives. He slid the folder back across the desk toward me, as though it were contaminated. "I want you focused on approvals, not audits. We move forward, we don't stall." From that moment, the battle lines were drawn. I went back to my office, shut the door, and stared at the folder. I could already feel the air in the plant growing thicker, heavier. My risk register wasn't paranoia, it was proof. The filters were old, the alarms overdue for testing, the forklifts missing regular maintenance. And that was just the start. But now the man at the top had declared war on my work. I decided then that if my role was going to be treated like a nuisance, I would need to play a different game. Instead of relying only on the official system, I began keeping my own shadow archive. I bought a small black notebook and started logging dates, times, names, and the tiniest details that might later matter. I backed up photographs onto an external drive I kept at home. Every violation I noted officially, I also recorded privately, along with the reactions and dismissals they received. The first time I wrote the words suppressed by Grant in my notebook, my hand shook. But I kept going. Weeks passed, and his policies began to reshape the environment. Safety briefings were shortened from 30 minutes to 10. Inspections were postponed with the justification of operational priorities. Training schedules were gutted. Supervisors began using phrases like "do more with less" and "stop crying compliance." One afternoon, I was walking the floor when a machinist named Darren pulled me aside. His mask hung loose around his neck, and his forehead was slick with sweat. "Marissa," he whispered, glancing around nervously, "the air's bad. Worse than usual. We've been coughing all week." I asked him to keep his mask on, promised I would escalate the report, and noted the particulate readings from the sensors near his station. The numbers made my stomach drop. They weren't just high, they were dangerous. I drafted a detailed report and submitted it to Grant with urgency highlighted in bold. 2 hours later, he summoned me again. He was holding the report, his thumb pressed so hard into the paper it looked ready to tear. "This," he said with disdain, "is fair trash again. Do you know what happens if this gets circulated? People panic. Production slows. And that means you're costing us $3 million a day in potential revenue. Do you want that on your conscience?" His words twisted like a knife. He was trying to make me believe that protecting lives was the sin, while ignoring danger was the virtue. I stood silently, staring at him, realizing that reason would never work here. When I left his office, I didn't shred my copy of the report like he had demanded. Instead, I folded it neatly and slipped it into the folder at the back of my desk drawer, the one labeled skeleton sheet. It was my quiet rebellion, my growing arsenal. The pressure around the office intensified. People began to whisper about close calls, machines stuttering, sparks flying, minor accidents that could have been worse. Grant strutted through it all with his tailored suits and his motivational speeches about pushing limits. To him, risk was just another currency. I found myself working late, long after the lights dimmed, scanning incident reports into my private archive. I kept thinking about Darren's words, the coughing, the air, and I knew it wasn't just discomfort, it was danger. One evening, as I stood by the window watching the factory floor, I imagined the collapse that could come, the catastrophe waiting to happen because someone wanted numbers instead of safety. I tightened my grip on the folder in my arms and whispered to myself, "You're not going to erase this." That night, I mailed a copy of my skeleton sheet to my sister, Emma. I didn't explain in detail, just told her to keep it safe, just in case. She replied with confusion, but I told her I'd explain later. The truth was, I wasn't sure there would be a later if something went wrong. Grant thought he was silencing me with mockery and dismissal. He thought by calling my work fair trash he could strip it of value. What he didn't understand was that every word, every sneer, every deletion only fueled my resolve. I didn't need to fight him openly. I only needed to let him keep going, pushing harder, cutting deeper, until the cracks he created swallowed him whole. The weeks after I mailed the skeleton sheet to Emma felt like walking a tightrope over open fire. Every step I took inside Blue Core Systems felt more dangerous, more precarious, and I could sense the weight of what I was carrying in my notebook and in the hidden files that no one else knew existed. I moved through the office quietly, speaking only when necessary, recording everything in silence. Grant was too busy with his grand plans and quarterly projections to notice that the woman he called paranoid was quietly building the rope that would hang him. Things came to a head one Thursday morning when the floor alarms blared. I rushed down to the production bay, my heart pounding, and found workers coughing violently, eyes red, some bending over to vomit against the wall. The particulate meters had spiked beyond safe thresholds beyond even the numbers I had reported. The filters had failed entirely, choked with dust and toxic fibers. I shouted for evacuation, helped people out of the bay, and scribbled the time, the readings, and the witnesses into my notebook while others scrambled for clean air. By the time I filed the official report, I felt both terrified and vindicated. This wasn't paranoia, it was proof written in the burning lungs of my coworkers. I typed every detail carefully, attached photographs of the blackened filters and the particulate graph that spiked like a knife through the screen. For a brief moment, I thought maybe, just maybe, the evidence was undeniable. But later that day, when I logged back into the system to check the report status, it was gone. Not reassigned. Not marked as resolved. Deleted. Entirely vanished from the record as though it had never been filed. I froze at my desk. My hands went numb. Someone had deliberately erased it, and I didn't need a fortune teller to know who. Grant called me in that afternoon. He didn't even look guilty. He leaned back in his chair, his smile wide and triumphant. "Marissa, we had a little technical hiccup today, but you and I both know accidents happen. There's no reason to blow this out of proportion. You understand." I stared at him, and in that moment, I realized something critical. He wasn't just reckless, he was confident that he could bury the truth forever. That arrogance was the opening I had been waiting for. I nodded slowly, pretending to agree. Of course, no reason to escalate. He chuckled, satisfied, and dismissed me with a wave. I walked back to my desk, shut the door, and pulled out my skeleton sheet. Every line I had written before now carried sharper weight, and I began adding more. Deleted reports. Particulate spikes. Wake a testimony. I attached the photographs from that morning, the ones of coughing employees and stained masks. This wasn't just a notebook anymore, it was a dossier. But I knew a file in my drawer wasn't enough. Not anymore. If the system could delete my reports, then I needed a system beyond their reach. That night, at home, I scanned the documents again and created a secure archive on a separate encrypted drive. I used a clean laptop, not my company-issued one, and drafted an anonymous email account that could never be traced back to me. The first time I typed out the words Occupational Safety and Health Administration in the recipient field, my hands trembled. My finger hovered over the send button. If I pressed it, there was no undo. My evidence would no longer belong to me, it would belong to investigators, to the government, to whoever needed it most. But then I thought about Darren coughing in the corner, about the red-eyed workers clutching their throats, about the way Grant smirked while wiping their suffering from the record. And I clicked send. The email carried the skeleton sheet, photographs, and a timeline of everything I had documented. I signed it only, a concerned employee. Afterward, I sat in the dark of my apartment, staring at the glow of the screen. My body felt heavy with both fear and relief. Fear of what might come if I were discovered, and relief that the weight was no longer entirely on my shoulders. The truth was out there now, alive in someone else's inbox. The next few days were strangely quiet. Grant strutted through meetings, still pushing his reckless schedules, still dismissing safety as an obstacle. He had no idea the storm brewing just beyond the horizon. But I knew. And with every hour that passed, my confidence grew. I didn't need to fight him openly. All I needed was patience. He had already built the tinder. All I had done was strike the match. One Friday afternoon, an email arrived in my personal inbox from Emma. She had received the package, read through the skeleton sheet, and was alarmed. "What are you doing, Marissa?" she wrote. "This looks serious. Are you safe?" I replied with a simple truth. "I'm safer now than before. Just keep it for me. If anything happens, you'll know what to do." Grant thought he had silenced me by deleting that report. What he didn't know was that the moment he tried to bury it was the moment I decided to bury him instead. Quietly, thoroughly, without leaving a fingerprint. The wheels were in motion now, and there was no turning back. The silence in the plant broke one Monday morning when 3 black sedans pulled into the lot, their doors swinging open with sharp precision. Men and women in official jackets stepped out, clipboards in hand, badges gleaming in the sunlight. OSHA had arrived. Word spread like wildfire through the halls. Compliance officers were here, and they weren't here for a routine visit. I was in my office when I heard footsteps approaching. They moved with authority, not the hurried shuffle of employees trying to keep up with production deadlines. When they appeared at my door, I forced myself to look surprised, not relieved. They asked for access to environmental readings, filter replacement logs, and recent safety inspections. I handed over everything they requested, at least, everything that hadn't already been erased. They didn't seem surprised by the gaps. Out on the floor, workers whispered nervously as inspectors measured air quality, photographed broken emergency lights, and seized boxes of improperly labeled chemicals. Grant appeared suddenly, striding toward them like a politician facing cameras. He extended his hand, offered a rehearsed smile, and declared, "Gentlemen, I can assure you everything is under control here. My team is fully committed to safety." But when they asked him about the missing reports, the ones I knew he had deleted, his smile faltered. He stammered something about technical errors, about data migration. They pressed harder, showing him fresh photos of clogged filters they had pulled from machines only minutes earlier. His face flushed, his composure cracking like glass under pressure. By noon, production had ground to a halt. OSHA declared the environment unsafe for work and ordered an immediate shutdown. The numbers spread quickly. Blue Core Systems was burning $3 million every single day the facility remained closed. The factory floor emptied, the machines silent, and the once bustling corridors echoed with disbelief. Grant stormed through the building, his polished shoes clicking against the tile like gunfire. He barged into my office without knocking, his face red and twisted. "This is your doing," he spat. "You've been feeding them. You think I don't see it? You want to destroy me, don't you?" I kept my expression steady, my hands folded calmly on the desk. "I've only ever done my job, Grant." He slammed his fist onto the table. "Your job is to support operations, not sabotage them. You think OSHA cares about your little notes? They'll bleed this company dry, and guess who they'll blame? You. I'll make sure of it." But even as he raged, his phone buzzed. He looked down, eyes darting over the screen, and I saw the shift in his posture. Headquarters wasn't standing by him anymore. They had seen the numbers, the photographs, the seized evidence. His bravado crumbled. By the end of the week, Grant was escorted out of the building, his office cleared, his title revoked. There was no farewell speech, no final show of dominance, just silence and the sound of a career collapsing. The company scrambled to recover. Safety teams were reinstated, wellness check-ins became mandatory, and leadership scheduled sensitivity training sessions as though empathy could be mandated by memo. But the damage was done. Contracts were lost, investors grew wary, and the name Blue Core carried a stain that no rebranding campaign could wash away. Through it all, I stayed quiet. I didn't boast, didn't confess, didn't so much as hint that the anonymous email had been mine. My skeleton sheet remained with Emma, untouched but safe. The evidence had done its work. I no longer needed to wield it. One evening, as I updated my LinkedIn profile, I noticed a new connection request from someone at the Department of Labor. My lips curved into the faintest smile. Opportunity was reaching out, not because I chased it, but because I had stood my ground when it mattered. I didn't accept immediately. I sat back, letting the weight of the months sink in. Grant had destroyed himself. I had only documented the truth, and when the time came, I let the truth speak louder than his arrogance. The factory floor would recover someday, though slower than the shareholders hoped. The workers would breathe cleaner air, stand under brighter lights, and maybe, just maybe, trust that someone was watching out for them. And me? I found peace not in revenge, but in knowing that silence had been my sharpest weapon. I didn't scream, didn't fight him head-on. I simply let him walk the path he had chosen, straight into the collapse he built for himself. Moral lesson. When I look back, I realized the greatest power I held wasn't in confrontation, it was in patience and documentation. Too often, those in authority gamble with the lives of people beneath them, believing that silence equals consent. But silence can also be a strategy, and evidence can be a louder voice than anger. Grant thought speed was more valuable than safety, but he forgot that every shortcut leaves a trail. By recording that trail, I ensured his downfall was inevitable. The truth is, telling the truth should never feel like a risk, yet in many workplaces it does. What I want you to take from my story is this: protect yourself with facts, guard your integrity with care, and trust that arrogance always burns itself out. To anyone listening right now, I want you to hold on to this lesson. Sometimes justice doesn't come from shouting the loudest, but from quietly holding the line until the lies collapse. So guys, if this story touched you, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, share it with your friends, and drop your thoughts in the comments. Your voice matters, and your story could inspire someone else's courage.